başlayabilirsiniz.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our today's session. Today we will talk about discourse analysis and populism. Before starting, I would like to very briefly introduce myself. My name is Mustafa Burak Şener. I am the president of the Congress and also chair of this session. Today we will have 4 presentations, indeed 3 presentations. I would like to tell the name of the presentations and the presenters. First, Hazal Kocaer and Cengiz Çakır, Constructing a Domestic and National Family, a Policy and Discourse Analysis of the AKP Government. And then Büşra Yüksel will continue with the topic of Political Communication and Populism, the Case of Europe. And then thirdly, Elif Bakar, Migration, Afghan Children on the Way to Europe. And I would like to kindly remind to our presenters that each of them has 15 minutes. And dear listeners who follow us on YouTube, you can send your questions to us on YouTube also. And if you are ready, Hazal and Elgis, you can start presenting your topic.
Thank you, Burak. Today, Hazal and I will be presenting our paper, as you said, focusing on the construction of domestic and national family within the AKP government. So this is our outline, the presentation outline. I'll start with the questions we had when we started our research, and then continue with the construction of family and women's role in the 3 terms of the AKP government. And then Hazal will continue with the Istanbul Convention. We started our research by asking 2 questions. First one was, how does family being constructed through policies and discourses of the AKP government? And the second question was, how was the opposition towards the Istanbul Convention was used to strengthen this construction? So according to Bourdieu, family is a well-founded fiction because it is an institution that is produced and reproduced by the state to construct the social reality via the discourses and policies on what is family, what it entails, why is it a universally fundamental institution for the society. He argues that the family discourse is comprised of state ideals and interests that favor a specific type of family that is suitable for the interest of the state, verifying and reproducing itself for that interest. What is thought to be private thus becomes and constructed by the public and the state and belongs to the state. What is the private actually belongs to the state. The ones that conform to the specific type of family that is defined by the state gain a privilege of being normal and benefit from the policies and are immune to the punishments from the state. But the ones that do not conform are faced with the consequences. The Adalet and Kalkınma Partisi members and the government have been using discourses and implementing social policies to create an ideal family type that serves with their neoliberal, conservative, and later Islamist ideology that underlies their aim to establish new Turkey, as they say. The AKP's ideal family is constructed with patriarchal, conservative, and Islamic norms that create a dynamic based on hegemonic, profound gender inequality and is centered in every political discussion, discourse, and family policy to maintain the society's obedience and secure their hegemony. Now, I would like to start with their first term. Since the beginning, the AKP government emphasized the family as the foundation of the society. They have used neoliberal and conservative discourses and policies that put the family at the center of social and economic welfare. As you can see from this speech, it says, family is the foundation of society and an important institution that plays a role in the formation of social solidarity. The way of social happiness, solidarity, peace, love, and respect passes through family. Despite all the negativities and economic difficulties experienced, it is clear that we owe our standing as a society to our strong family structure. Our government will give priority to family-centered politics. It is very clearly stated here. These discourses have put the primary responsibility of stability and development on the family, in accordance with their recurring vision of New Turkey. Erdogan said all economic hardships were to be defeated with our strong family structure, so they give the priority to family-centered politics. The family's role in shaping the beliefs and actions of individuals was highly recognized and was used as a tool prioritized for their best interests. The care responsibility was also given to the family. And by looking at Erdogan's speeches and the ones in the upcoming years, which state women's special position in raising the healthy generations for the society as mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters, it can be understood that what is meant by family responsibility is actually women's responsibility, because women were only mentioned for their duty of reproduction and providing care. When we come to the second term, as we can see in the speech on the International Women's Day in 2008, which was the beginning of their second term, Erdogan made the first step in interfering with women's autonomy over their own bodies. I'm speaking to you not as a prime minister, but as your troubled brother. We must protect our young population. Humans are the main component of an economy. They want to eradicate the Turkish nation. This is exactly what they did. Have at least 3 children so that our young population does not decrease. He made the first step of interfering with women's autonomy over their own bodies on a day that is specifically curated for women, reducing women's place and value to only inside the family and putting the responsibility of protecting the economy, trying to strengthen traditional patriarchal family values for the creation of New Turkey. He positioned himself as a brother, implying that he is a part of a woman's private life and has a right to say on her choices and lifestyle. Using biopolitics has rendered women to only their reproductive capacities and decreased their status from being equal citizens to secondary citizens. This rendering strengthens the gendered hierarchy both in the family and in the society. As we can see from the second quote, a couple years later, he directly addressed women as his sisters and requested to donate at least 3 children, saying that this is his most natural right. Can we skip to the next slide, please? Thank you. We have not imposed a legal obligation for this. This is something optional, but I, as a prime minister, I am recommending 3 children. This is my most natural right. We're not holding a gun to anybody's head to have 3 children. I am calling on those sisters who are devoted to our cause. Come, please donate to this station at least 3 children. He is requesting to donate at least 3 children, saying that his most natural right. With this request, children were also including in having responsibility to serve the government's interests beside women. This speech has also made a clear distinction between what is the ideal woman, who is a devoted wife and a mother who fulfills her duty of raising and bearing children, and the other, basically all other women that do not conform, fit the description, and they have been blamed and put to target for not serving their interests. For example, in later years, Erdogan defined abortion as murder, leading to a de facto ban in state hospitals, restricting women's access to their legal rights. Similarly, he referred to C-sections as treason to the Turkish nation because after having 2 C-sections, a woman cannot have more children because of medical risks, and this contradicts with his 3 children requests from women. Discourses on reproduction have caused a direct violation of women's human rights and stripped women of their autonomy over their own bodies, rendering them powerless. When we come to the third term, their discourse on family started to be increasingly derived from Islamist ideology. In 2011, the name of the Ministry of Women and Family was changed to Ministry of Family and Social Policies, which symbolically erased women's individuality and put family before women as equal citizens and individuals. The ministry then made several statements defining women as mothers, aunts, daughters, and sisters. They also cooperated with the Directorate of Religious Affairs to protect and strengthen the Turkish family structure in line with Islamic ideologies, to regulate and shape the structure of the ideal Turkish family for New Turkey. From that point on, all party members heavily relied on Islamic rhetoric while interfering with women's lives, bodies, and sexualities in the name of protecting and strengthening the family. Erdogan has used the term fıtrat in explaining the unequal gender dynamics between women and men, and clearly stating that he did not believe in the equality of women and men because it was against the fıtrat. Fıtrat makes a clear distinction between men and women's role and abilities by defining women with motherhood and men with decision-making or breadwinning. The use of discourses on women's chastity, moral values, and bodies, sexualities normalize the possession of and objectification of women, as we can see from this quote from Arendt in 2014. Chastity is so important. It is not only a name, it is an ornament for both women and men. She will have chasteness. Men will have it too. He will not be a womanizer. He will be bound to his wife. He will love his children. The woman will know what is haram and what is not. She will not laugh in public. She will not be inviting in her attitudes and will protect her chasteness. So these type of discourses on women's chastity, moral values, strengthen the idea that women can only protect their values if they preserve their pureness and honor. All these discourses and policies helped degrade women's autonomy and power as individuals and paved the way for the exploitation and abuse of women, because the society has started to internalize and normalize the secondary position and possession of women, which makes them vulnerable to all types of violences, both in the private and the public sphere. Now, Hazal will continue with the process of making of the Istanbul Convention and the withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Elgiz. I think it's important to address why Istanbul Convention has occurred. Nahida Opuz was subjected to violence several times by Hüseyin Opuz, her husband. Despite filing a complaint with the police office and the prosecution authorities, she wasn't able to achieve any results, and the state failed to protect her. While she was moving from another city with her mother and children, her path was cut off by the perpetrator, Hüseyin Opuz, resulting in Hüseyin Opuz killing her mother. Nahida Opuz applied to the European Court of Human Rights on the grounds that the state didn't protect her in 2002, and ECHR found Turkey guilty of not preventing violence against women and protecting women. This statement in the judgment summarizes the situation, and I quote, "The research conducted by the above-mentioned organizations indicates that when victims report domestic violence to police stations, police officers don't investigate their complaints, but seek to assume the role of mediator by trying to convince the victim to return home and drop their complaint. In this connection, police officers consider the problem as a family matter with which they cannot interfere. This case has damaged the reputation of Turkey in the process of joining the European Union. Turkey took an immediate action and became one of the signatories of Istanbul Convention at the meeting held in Istanbul in 2011 with the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe. The aim of the convention is to protect women from all forms of violence and as well as domestic violence, and to force legal sanctions, and policies to prevent and eliminate violence against women. One legal sanction is the law number 6284, which aims to regulate the measures to be taken to protect women, children, family members, and people who are victims of stalking and to prevent violence against them. The proposed law about the approval of the Istanbul Convention was sent to the parliament by the then Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan and was supported and accepted by the reports prepared by the Commission on Equal Opportunities for Women and Men and the Foreign Affairs Commission. Fatma Şahin, then Minister of Family and Social Policies, said about the convention that, and I quote, "We see this convention as an important framework regarding violence against women and we attach great importance to it. The Council of Europe opened the agreement for signature in Istanbul and our Minister of Foreign Affairs signed for the first signature on behalf of the government. We see the violence against women as a violation of human rights and a matter of internal security. The life of a woman is our life. Protecting her is the most important duty." As time passed, and AKP gained more authority, it became more and more authoritative. The repressive use of force in the Gezi Park protest was an important breaking point of authoritarianism. After this breaking point, Erdogan monopolized power and take greater control of the armed force, economy, bureaucracy, judiciary, and the media. The empowered and authoritative AKP made pro-AKP scholars, journalists, and members of parliaments gain more strength. They started attacking on Istanbul Convention, having a main concern about family. We mentioned three scholars here as examples. So Fikret Yaman believed that the continuation of the implementation of the law number 6284 will deepen social problems since it doesn't seek evidence and documents regarding the use of violence and disables the mediation mechanism. He continues his words by saying some attitudes and behaviors are violence, but not all, and strict protection systems for women based on unacceptable violence let all kinds of attitudes and behaviors between family members defined as violence. Also, he defends that it is incorrect to completely reject social roles imposed on women and men based on their gender. Also, Burhanettin Can claims that the Istanbul Convention and Law number 6284 are a war on privacy and makes connections between the expected family life and expected women in Islam and how convention and the law contradicts them. Discourses regarding convention continues. As you can see, Akif Dursun claims that the core concepts on Istanbul Convention conflict with the nature of the human being, as Ergiz also mentioned, insanın fıtratına ters, and the core values of Islam. Articles demanding the elimination of the role of religion in determining the roles of men and women include religious security, and the articles protecting and even encouraging illicit cohabitation, degendering, and deviance that threaten generational safety. Pro-AKP newspapers also approved and produced the understanding of the destruction of family, degendering, normalization of being gay, and against our culture and religion towards the convention. Yeni Akit published statements of Sema Maraşlı, who known as being men's advocate, on the convention, saying that, and I quote, "Every year, thousands of men are kicked out of their homes on the basis of women's statements, or they are slandered for sexual abuse and given heavy penalties despite being innocent." And pointing out that the convention, which initially aimed to strengthen the women's rights, was manipulated by a segment trying to normalize homosexuality, which is incompatible with Turkey's social and familial values. The statement emphasized that Turkey's decision to withdraw from the convention was based on this reason. Also, other newspapers such as Yeni Şafak claims that the convention promotes LGBT, and withdrawing from the convention is a declaration of cultural independence. And so Erdogan announced the withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention, which Turkey was the first signatory and proud of it, with a presidential decree published at official gazette. Although large protests were held on international and national level, Erdogan chose not to listen. This decision has been celebrated by some Islamic and conservative groups with the exact words of Turkey trashed the Istanbul Convention. After the decision of withdrawal from the convention, the Minister of Interior, Süleyman Soylu, claimed that the number of femicides have decreased by 26%. Around the same time, the new Minister of Social and Feminine and Social Services, Derya Yanık, didn't see a problem to refer to the number of femicides as tolerable, whereas by the time she had this speech on 24th of March, 102 women were killed. In conclusion, with neoliberal and conservative policies, AKP has always put family in the center of every political debate and decision, because neoliberal policies require the family to take on the primary responsibility of care work and indirectly economic and social growth. In order to secure and strengthen their hegemony and the goal of New Turkey, AKP has used Islamic and traditionalist discourses on family while erasing women's individuality and existence out of the context. Their discourses and policies encourage the Islamist, misogynist, and bigoted sections of the society to oppress, threaten, and abuse women, since they are treated as secondary status citizens by the state. Before we end our presentation, as March 8th approaches, we want to say that we want real justice, not male justice, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Elgiz and Hazar. It was a very interesting topic. End of session, we will also receive the questions. Now, Büşra Özüksel, if you are ready, you can start with your presentation.
Thank you, Burak. Let me first share my screen. Sorry. For the sake of uninterrupted presentation, I will turn off my video. Sorry for that. First of all, let me introduce myself. I am Büşra Özüksel. I'm a PhD student at University of Szeged, Faculty of Law and Political Science. Today, as you can see on my title, I'm going to make a presentation about political communication and populism, the case of Europe. The content of my presentation is as it is written here. First, I will start with the introduction, research question, and my method. Then I will mention about populism in general. Later, I will mention populism's reason in Europe. After that, I will continue with political communication, and there are two subtitles there, the case of Europe and European media. And later, I will mention the effect on citizens, and lastly, my conclusion and assessment. Populism's roots are based on 19th and 20th century, yet today's political discourse is utilizing it more than ever. In the study, I take populism as right-wing populist wave, and case study, I take Europe. On the rise of populism, media and political communication have gained crucial importance for transmitting the populist messages to the people. In this study, I explained the relation between populism and political communication and how populist discourse uses communication, which constitutes my research question. During my study, I used qualitative method by focusing on oral literature about the topic. First of all, populism in general. Populist discourse becomes widespread in the politics of contemporary Western democracies, and populist communicative strategies or tools are not only owned by new right-wing policies, but also used by new left and center or technocratic policies. This situation is called the popular spirit of the time, zeitgeist, by Mudde. Although the studies on populism are increasing day by day, there is still no universally accepted definition of the concept. Nature of populism causes the concept to be shaped around three different definitions. Populist concept is defined as political organization style, political communication style, or team-centered ideology. These three definitions do not contradict each other in a sense and accept the people and elites as the two basic elements of the concept. The point that makes the definitions different is that there is no consensus on the main reason that makes populist parties and leaders populist, and that populist actors show different characteristics in different parts of the world, so definitions differ depending on the situation. Acceptance of populism as a political communication style adds measurability to populism. In this context, populist political actors criticize the current order by referring to concepts such as the people and the national will. Thus, populism is hidden in the language or discourse used by populist actors, political actors. Populist political actors place the established institutions and existing elites in the other part of their populist discourse, claiming that the interests of the people are ignored by the corrupt elites, and this situation disrupts the welfare order of the society. Mudde again argues that populist parties have now found a place in political life as a new party family and have become mainstream parties. While there may be concepts of us and them varying from country to country, among this new party family, there are differences of opinion and discourse between the populist parties of any two countries. As for the populism's reason in Europe, labor migrations to Western Europe after 1960 formed a reason for the emergence of populist movements in the following years. In this context, the main arguments of populist parties and leaders in Europe consist of social, economic, and political problems caused by immigrants. Populist parties in Europe argue that immigrants cannot adapt to European culture, so they damage the local culture by disrupting the social structure. Populist parties in Europe form their perception of us, the people, on the axis of indigenous people of Europe who speak the same language and share the same interests and shape their perception of others around the dangerous others who threaten the structure of the people. Along with these common points, it's seen that some populist parties carry out their political rhetoric over anti-Semitism, ethnic and religious distinction. And the essence of my study is the political communication. Although there are important differences between them, one of the common points of populist movements and leaders is their skillful use of mass media. According to some, media performance is more important than any other element for today's populist movements, which can be called neo-populist. Especially tabloid media has an extremely important place in legitimizing and polishing marketing populist leaders and themes. For example, in Austria, newsroom populism has been instrumental in creating a very favorable climate of persuasion for the Freedom Party of Austria, FPÖ. The other example is the constant focus of tabloidized Sunday newspapers on identity and security news in Switzerland has facilitated the populist far-right movements. And my case study, the case of Europe, along with the rising trend of populism, increasingly notwithstanding differences of countries, European democracies seem to be affected by the spirit of political populism. Two approaches toward populism can be elaborated here. First one is defining the identity of political populist actors and continue through discovering elements that may clarify their existence and influence the way they communicate. The other touch is to identify populist political communication's core characters later explores the comprehension to which distinguished political actors utilize from populist communication strategies, tactics, styles, and discourse. The first method focuses on populist political players and derives conclusions regarding populist communication techniques, tactics, styles, and rhetoric based on how these actors communicate. The second, on the other hand, concentrates on populist communication techniques, tactics, styles, and rhetoric. Based on the amount to which political players participate in populist communication, it makes inferences regarding the prevalence and pervasiveness of populist political communication, as well as which political actors are populist. You can see the right-wing populist parties in Europe here, and you can follow while I am speaking about them. Populist actors in Europe are often equated with the far-right anti-immigration behaviors and nationalism. Some examples consist of the Austrian Freedom Party, Vlaams Belang in Belgium, Front National in France, the Progress Party in Norway, Wilders Freedom Party in the Netherlands, National Renewal Party in Portugal, the Sweden Democrats, and Golden Dawn in Greece. Some of them are regionalist too, such as Lega Nord in Italy and Platform for Catalonia in Spain. Although these parties are easily identified as populist in Europe, they are not the only political actors that have been characterized as such. Several parties and movements, including the Action of Dissatisfied Citizens in the Czech Republic, Podemos in Spain, the Five Star Movement in Italy, and the 12 March Movement in Portugal, have capitalized on popular discontent caused by corruption scandals and the implementation of unpopular policies. These parties and movements frequently promise a revitalization of political processes and more direct forms of democracy. And European media. Throughout Europe, a diverse range of populist political parties and personalities have established themselves as important political participants despite the dynamics of both local and European politics. European media should be mentioned in terms of a vehicle to transmit the messages to the people. Here you can see some European media channels. In the previous several decades, European media networks have undergone significant changes, including expanded opportunity structures for the dissemination of populist themes, the loss of the traditional party press, greater media ownership concentration, reliance on advertising, and a stronger emphasis toward news values have all contributed to the rise of populist rhetoric. With the improvement of media and social media, a new kind of populism appeared, media populism. The term media populism refers to three separate viewpoints, which I won't go deep into that because of the limited time. There are populism by the media, populism via the media, and populist citizen journalism. What about the effects on citizens? So there are some effects of political communication on citizens. Grasp populism requires an understanding of communication mechanisms. Despite ongoing disagreements about the concept, there is a growing consensus that looking at populism through the lens of communication and media offers unique and important insight into how populism works, particularly in light of a rapidly changing high-choice media environment that may have transformed the very foundations of mainstream populist success. References to and the concentration on a homogeneous people can be viewed as a crucial component of populist ideology and attitude. This indicates that the major distinguishing element of populism is the formation of an in-group of the people or the appeal to citizens' identification as members of the people. Populist communication has a significant impact on citizens' attitudes, emotions, and behaviors. Some academics even believe that the media's attention to populist leaders, as well as the media's actual adoption of populist ideas, is one of the primary factors of populism's political success. Recent empirical study has looked at the impact of populist communication on a diverse group of individuals. For example, Matisse and Schmuck discovered that populist communication is more compelling to individuals with lower levels of education. According to Boss et al., populist appeals are especially successful among the politically skeptical. According to the empirical findings of Hemeliers and Schmuck, support of the source is also important in the adoption of populist messages. Only citizens who feel connected to or support the source are favorably impacted by populist communication. People who have pre-existing beliefs that are compatible with populist communication are the only ones who choose populist messaging. Citizens who feel linked to the in-group of disadvantaged regular citizens, as well as those who feel far from elites and/or social outgroups, are more inclined to choose populist communication. The real impression of selected populist messages is based on the message's resonance with people's past opinions. Identification with the nation-state, Europe, and the poor plays an important part in the impact of populist rhetoric. Another critical element to consider is the resonance of populist communication with real-life opportunity structures. On a national level, this indicates that populist propaganda blaming economic elites may have the greatest impact on political assessments in countries that experience the most severe impacts of the European economic crisis. Messages that blame immigrants for regular people's issues may have the greatest impact in nations that have recently dealt with a large inflow of immigrants, such as Germany. And my conclusion and assessment. As a result, individuals in nations where populist parties have a greater presence should be more familiar with populist speech. The populist message may trigger widely available schemata of populist framing among these individuals. In conclusion, populism has been rising through Europe despite existing and strong democracies. As a political communication mechanism, populism targets to reach the people. To do this, media is the most significant vehicle of populist leaders and news. People, on the other hand, got affected by populist messages according to many different variables. And here you can see my references, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Büşra, for your beautiful presentation. Now, by the way, dear listener, if you have a question to Büşra, you can write on YouTube, and I will follow your question end of the session. Now, finally, we will continue with Elif Bakar. The topic, migration, Afghan children on the way to Europe. Elif, if you are ready, you can share your screen and start your presentation.
Excuse me. I will share it again. So.
It's okay now. We can see your presentation.
Okay,
you can make it full screen if you wish.
Yeah,
that's great.
Okay,
you can start if you wish, but we can't hear you. Just a second.
Really?
Yes, we can. Sorry.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, hello everybody. Today I will be talking about migration manner in terms of Afghan children on the way to Europe. And let me introduce myself. I'm Elif Bakar. I'm doing MA in the Department of Human Rights and Multi-Level Governance in the University of Padua in Italy. So to begin with, as you all know, humanity has experienced many difficulties throughout the course of history, and child migration is one of these without a doubt. The concept of migration is in a nutshell, is a geographical displacement movement of human communities by settling from one settlement unit to another in order to spend all or a part of their lives due to religious, economic, political, social, and there might be other reasons as well. As defined by the United Nations, migration reasons can be economic, religious, political, social, environmental, and migration also can be seasonal, temporary, permanent, voluntary, or involuntary. So when we speak about the children's rights, the most related convention comes to our mind, which is, as you also know, all know, Convention on the Rights of the Child. It's also significant to highlight that this convention is one of the most accepted conventions in the world. According to the Article 1 of this convention, every human being who is under 18 years old can be defined as a child. According to the same convention, a child should be afforded necessary protection and assistance. Children migrants are protected also under the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all Migrant Workers and their families. This study wants to focus on Afghan children migrants, in particular their protection and educational rights on their way to Europe. So in recent years, Europe is experiencing an increase in the number of migrant children, and the phenomenon of migration to Europe has been characterized by continual evolution simply because of frequent changes in common migration routes, the length of the stay in transit countries. Children are experiencing dangerous journeys, exposed to considerable health risks, and most importantly, they keep away from their basic rights, which is protection and education. So the first part of my study gives an overview of the situation of Afghan children migrants on their way to Europe with two specific cases, and the same part will specify Afghan children migrants' difficulties to reach their basic rights of protection and education. The second part will specify on child migrants' rights with the concept of the Convention on the Rights of the Child of Article 24(2)(a) and the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all migrant workers and the members of their families of Article 12(4). The conclusion wishes to highlight how the basic needs of the child migrants have been ignored beyond the debate between a close and broad view on children's rights. So to highlight the beginning, according to one of the UNICEF reports on refugee and migrant children in Europe, almost 13% of migrants in Europe are Afghan children migrants. And I thought addressing this kind of a sensitive issue would be beneficial to raise an awareness in the world. So to begin to first part, pursuant to a report by Science Direct, most of the unaccompanied Afghan children are living in the United Kingdom, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Italy. Afghan children could not remember a time when wars were not being fought in Afghan soil. And these children do not even know why wars happened in Afghanistan. They are facing the realities of the war in the most painful way. The effects of the war, the wealth level in the country, limits to access to educational rights, and the security threat are the biggest factors in the migration of the children. Afghan children have filled far more asylum applications in Europe during the recent years, and plus, their dangerous journey is unaccompanied. Before the EU-Turkey deal, which aimed to halt that the flow of migrants and which came into force in spring 2016, the majority of unaccompanied minors used to Balkan transit as transit to reach to Europe. Those who did not use the aforementioned route choose to travel through the sea to Italy, which is a popular transit country in the matter of migration. So coercion, neglect, unsafety, and lack of support are what Afghan child migrants feel in their unaccompanied journey. Many Afghan asylum seeker children are not granted subsidiary protection even after a risky and traumatizing journey to Europe. The lack of support makes Afghan children vulnerable. Thus, they become an easy target for smugglers to be trafficked and denied from shelter, food, water, and medicine, while even their basic needs to live are ignored. I'm asking how Afghan children migrants get their right to education and protection and education. There are both negative and at the same time positive cases as well. So, for instance, the first case is from Italy. An Afghan child who was 14 years old when he arrived in Italy. He left Afghanistan when he was 11, traveled almost 3 years, and spent time in transit countries like Turkey and Greece. When he arrived in Italy, he was entered into a program for unaccommodated minors. And when he got out from the program, he could speak Italian relatively well and chose to stay in Italy. He was lucky, went to Rome and started to look forward to a new job. During the program, he met with a teacher who adopted him and sent him to school. He called his teacher as an Italian family. In his early 20s, he started to study political science in one of the oldest and best universities in Italy. At the same time, working as a translator. He was lucky to manage all his journey to finalize with a success story and benefit from the rights which he already had. This type of experience is rare among the migrant children in Europe. Another case is for those who stuck in the borders and again who cannot move anywhere. Thousands of children are standing on the doorstep of Europe. A group of unaccompanied children aged between 12 and 16 had been living in Serbia border with Croatia. The place that they were hiding was adjacent to the path they hoped to walk, to reach the Europe actually. They tried to attempt the crossing multiple times, but every time they were forcibly returned by Croatian border guards. Looking at these two examples, if children are not lucky, even finding food is a special and almost a luxury thing. Imagine that their rights of protection and education are how far away from them. Naturally, protection and educational rights are becoming a secondary luxury for Afghan children who are on the way to Europe. So, a child does not have to be a migrant to be sheltered from difficulties. As ratified in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, by reason of his physical and mental immaturity, needs special safeguards and care, including appropriate legal protection before as well as after birth. The Convention on the Rights of the Child obligates governments to treat all children within their territories equally, regardless of their migration status. The invisibility of migrating children and the lack of child-focused policies and services create substantial risk. Convention on the Rights of the Child 24.2a states state parties shall pursue full implementation of this right, and in particular shall take appropriate measures to ensure that all segments of society, in particular parents and children, are informed, have access to education, and are supported in the use of basic knowledge of child health and nutrition, the advantages of breastfeeding, hygiene and environmental sanitation, and the prevention of accidents. Even though the CRC protects all children, Afghan children are still exposed to huge risk at every stage of their migratory process, in the country that they lived during the journey upon arrival, and for those who get returned after the deportation. During the trip, it's a different kind of a danger that they are exposed to, because migrant children live with smugglers during their journey, and children who travel with smugglers are in a very high danger of moving into situations of trafficking. And unfortunately, it's a common fact in our world. International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of all Migrant Workers and Members of Their Families, Article 12.4, state parties to present convention undertake to have respect for liberty of parents, at least one of whom is a migrant worker. And when applicable, legal guardians to ensure the religious and moral education of their children in conformity with their own convictions. Even though they deserve basic rights just because they are children, and plus this convention is supportive of migrant workers' children, basic and educational rights, as mentioned, but they are still facing difficulties. It's a fact that they're not always negative examples, as mentioned, Ebu, and but a majority of migrant children, in particular Afghan children, are not protected and do not get the education that they need. So the solution can be sought in a combination of open education teaching methods and the intercultural aims and contents. After children's basic protection is provided for sure. According to one of the research from UNESCO, generational impacts are also somehow contradictory. It means that among first generation students arriving in the destination country at an earlier age is constantly associated with the higher educational attainment. So if the necessary protection can be provided, and if a child succeeds in arriving in a safer country, he or she can be more integrated into society and get the needed education. In particular, countries that have ratified these conventions are responsible to protect migrant children and provide the educational needs of them. So lastly, it is important to remember that children, despite legal studies, have the same rights everywhere in the world. This means that it does not matter a child's legal studies, what is a child's passport saying, and a child has the right to take education and protection without a doubt. The European Union and the Afghan government agreed upon a facilitated return mechanism in 2016, and in 2017, a total of 4,260 migrant children have returned from EU member states to Afghanistan. So deportations to Afghanistan are highly controversial and are regularly met with demonstrations and protests from refugee rights groups. However, in light of political pressure for quicker return across the EU, the number of returns is expected to be further increased. So Save the Children calls on the EU to stop returning children to Afghanistan and to support migration and return agencies in the development of robust child safeguarding and child protection policies. Furthermore, the Afghan government should include returning children refugees in their policies that should include take into account child protection. The Child Act, which addresses the rights of the children in Afghanistan, still awaits approval. There are considerable ethical issues that arise without working with children involved in migration. The Afghan children migration case proves that both negative and positive sides. As we have seen in the first part, some children are lucky to reach the protection and education they need, and some of them couldn't even manage to move, and they stuck in rural areas, neither find the survival needs. To put in a nutshell, Afghan child migrants need more attention on their way to Europe, and they do not need to be lucky to be realized because they already have the right to protection and education. The only matter is states who are parties to these conventions need to pay more attention to Afghan child migrants. So thank you so much for listening. I'm looking for your questions. If you have further questions, this is my email address. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Elif. It was a really good presentation as well. Your presentation in general was very interesting. I think we were lucky because it was a really good session, since we have a really three great presentation and really interesting topics. I'm checking YouTube if there is any question. In the meantime, if you have a question, also presenters, you can raise your hand. I think we don't have any question on YouTube. I check it. And is there anyone who would like to ask a question? You can raise your hand and ask your question. That is the time if you want to ask. Okay, I think we don't have any question. We don't have further question, but I just wonder a couple of things. Elgiz, my first question will be to Elgiz and Hazal. I just wonder about your opinion, because since your topic is very interesting for me, and I know you both are studying gender, and here I would like to ask about the risk of constructing a domestic and national family in Turkey. What is the risk, do you think?
I should answer.
Yes, you can. Also, Hazal, she can,
yeah.
as you wish.
The risk of constructing a domestic and national family, I mean, constructing a family in accordance with the interests of the AKP government is risky, actually. That's the risk we're talking about in this paper, because this family, this constructed family, puts women only inside the family and defines women with only the roles of motherhood, sisterhood, and daughterhood. So women as individuals is not an accepted idea. It becomes normalized to think of women as secondary citizens and the ones that help the nation who are comprised of men to move forward with the ideals of New Turkey. That is the risk we're talking about in this paper. So normalizing the inequality between men and women and paving the way for all kinds of abuse and violence against women is the risk here.
And I would like to just add on that there will always be some kind of women that are out of those concepts, like they are imposing a certain woman, a certain womanhood, a certain kind of family and motherhood. That's why it is not representing all women, I would say.
Thank you very much for your detailed answer. I have also one more question to Büşra Özyüksel. As far as I understand from your presentation, populism is on the rise in Europe, In fact, it's rising trend in the world. So is this dangerous? I mean, should we be afraid of it?
Well, in a verbal understanding, populism is not dangerous, of course, because it's for the people. It's populace, it's people. But in today's political environment, it's dangerous, unfortunately, because it's used to manage the perception of people. It's for the manipulating people. So in today's world politics, I think rising right-wing populism is dangerous. And on the other hand, there is left-wing populism as well, but that would be off topic to discuss it here. But right-wing populism is unfortunately dangerous because as I told, it's managing or it's manipulating people's understanding, especially the low-educated and people who live in the suburbs, etc. So people who have the closed-minded understanding towards the world politics. So I think today's populism, right-wing populism, is dangerous.
Thank you very much for your detailed answer. I think we exceed our time. So if you don't have further questions, with your excuse, I'm closing this session. Thank you very much. It was a really good presentation, and I really enjoyed during your presentation. See you soon. Have a good day. Bye-bye.